So you've probably heard about sending and receiving Bitcoin, but have you ever stopped to wonder what's really going on when that value moves? I mean, it's not just like sending a digital dollar bill. In this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you how a Bitcoin transaction actually works step by step. So let's just dive right into the big question. How does Bitcoin actually move from one person to another? And here's a hint. Forget everything you know about sending a file or an email. It's way more like you're signing over the deed to a tiny little piece of digital property. Once you get that one little shift in thinking, the whole system just clicks. And here's that big idea, the thing that changes everything. A Bitcoin transaction doesn't create new money out of thin air. Nope. It just extends a chain of ownership. Every single payment is directly and permanently linked to a previous one, creating this continuous public history of exactly where that value has been. At its very core, a transaction is really just a public message. You're not sending a file, you're not sending a physical coin. You are literally broadcasting an authorization to the entire network that says, hey everyone, the value I control, it now belongs to this new person. It's fundamentally a transfer of authority. Okay, I know that might sound a little abstract, so let's bring it back down to earth with an analogy that we can all get. Just think of the entire Bitcoin network as one giant public bookkeeping ledger. I mean, it's an ancient idea, tracking who owns what, but it has been completely reinvented for the digital age. So here's how this new kind of ledger is totally different. A traditional ledger, like from a bank, is private. It's controlled by one company and it tracks credits and debits. But with Bitcoin, the record is totally public for anyone to see. And it doesn't use credits and debits, it uses something called inputs and outputs. And, this is the big one, there's no central accountant. The entire network validates every single entry. All right, let's zoom in on those key terms, inputs and outputs. Seriously, these are the fundamental building blocks of every single transaction on the network. If you can understand how these two things dance together, you'll see the whole picture. But wait, before we dive deeper, we need a quick definition, just so we're all on the same page. We're going to be talking about value in terms of satoshis. A satoshi is just the smallest possible unit of a Bitcoin, kind of like how a cent is to a dollar. It's the base unit the system uses for counting, and trust me, it'll make our next example a whole lot easier to follow. So here's the flow of value in a nutshell. Inputs are where the value comes from, and they are always the outputs of a previous transaction. Outputs are where that value is going to, the new owners. And if the total value of the inputs is just a little bit more than the total of the outputs, that leftover amount doesn't just disappear. Nope, it becomes the fee that rewards the miner for processing the transaction. And this quote right here, it really nails the core idea. You never spend Bitcoin from some simple balance. What you're actually doing is taking the value you received from a past transaction and you're cryptographically signing it over to a new owner. It's this continuous, unbroken handoff of value through time. Okay, that's enough theory for now. The absolute best way to truly get this is to see it in action. So let's follow a single payment as it moves from one person to the next, creating its own little story on the blockchain. So let's meet our cast of characters. We've got Joe, who is going to kick off our little transaction chain. Then we have Alice, who's going to receive the value from Joe. And finally, there's Bob's store, where Alice wants to go buy something. All right, so first up, Joe sends Alice 100,000 satoshis. Now, here's the really crucial part. That value doesn't just go into some general Alice account. No, it exists on the blockchain as a specific unspent output from Joe's transaction. The best way to think of it is like a specific check written to Alice that she has yet to cash. It's hers and only she can spend it. So now, Alice goes shopping. She finds something she wants at Bob's store, and it costs 75,000 satoshis. But here's the problem. The only money she has is that single check from Joe, which is for the full 100,000 satoshis. And this is the puzzle, right? You can't just tear off a piece of a digital check. The entire value from Joe's transaction, all 100,000 satoshis, has to be spent all at once. So how in the world does she pay Bob the exact amount she owes? And here is the genius solution. Alice creates a brand new transaction. And for the input of this new transaction, she uses the entire 100,000 Satoshi output she received from Joe. She's basically cashing Joe's entire check to fund her new payment. And this is where the magic happens. Her single input of 100,000 Satoshis actually creates two brand new outputs. The first output sends 75,000 Satoshis to Bob's store. That's the payment. The second output? It sends 20,000 Satoshis right back to a new address at Alice controls. That's her change. And what about the last 5,000 Satoshis? Well, that's what's left over for the miner's fee. The books are perfectly balanced. How cool is that? What we've just witnessed is a transaction chain in action. The output from Joe's payment became the input for Alice's. And guess what? If Bob later spends the money he just got, Alice's output to him will become the input for his new transaction. It just keeps going, creating this unbroken, totally verifiable sequence of ownership. So you might be thinking, why is this whole intricate process so important? Well, because this unique structure of inputs and outputs is precisely what gives Bitcoin its most powerful properties. Let's wrap up with the key takeaways. Okay, if you remember anything from all this, remember this. You're not spending from an account balance. You are spending specific, unspent outputs from past transactions. This creates a public, verifiable chain of ownership that is locked forever into the blockchain, which makes it fundamentally different and, honestly, way more transparent than any traditional financial system we've ever had. And this whole thing leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. When every single transfer of value becomes part of a permanent public history, stretching all the way back to the very beginning, what does that mean for our ideas about privacy, about ownership, and about the future of money itself? That right there, that's the revolutionary idea at the very heart of Bitcoin.